And now for something completely different.
There's a great Italian futurist play. It's about 20 seconds long, maybe. Curtain opens. Backdrop is a quiet field of wheat. It's dusk, and then off stage there's a gunshot, and then the curtain.
That's very nice. That is very, very
It always
nice.
reminds me of the punctuated session.
That is what I mean. That is that is punctuated. That is short. That is that's everything. Yeah. So I think it's I think it designates it like, again, like this interesting thinking on this issue and like trying to sort the serial problem. And it's kind of funny, like, because I think in a more banal way, when, I mean, Todd always does this with shows that he doesn't like the ending of, is he thinks it should have ended there, like earlier, like, you know, what he thinks about Mad Men, the end of the previous season would have been perfect. And I think we often do this with you know, with fictional series, is just like, but if it ended there, I mean, even like Walter White has in the episode Fly, which is a bottle episode, like that's when he talks about, like, there would have been a perfect time for him to die. Like, if he had died at this particular time, no one would have found out about what he was doing. There would have been enough money. He would have been able to live with everyone thinking of him as the, like, in the ego ideal, right? Like and so
we do it with athletes, we do it with music.
Yeah,
you know, it's like a Kurt Cobain, you know, something like that.
Yeah, it's like if the Beatles made one more album, or like, they're actually a great example. They're like a good cliffhanger band because luckily they never went the way of the Rolling Stones, where they just like were zombies for like 50 years after that.
Well, it gets back to Seinfeld, because like that's when Jerry, I mean, Larry had already left the show, but when Jerry decides that he's going to end the show, all these executives at NBC were telling him, like, look, these are the ratings. Look, these are the ratings per season, per year. We don't know how high this can go. And his response was, we can only know that after we've fallen short of it.
Oh, wow.
So like, you know,
he went out on top. Yeah. Except the final episode, of course, which
is not very good, because it's a clip show. That's why it's.
Oh, you think so? Okay. I have a hot take with Seinfeld, is that as great as Larry David is, the show almost got better after he left the 7th season, and the only one that he came back for was the abominable last episode, which he wrote.
Yeah, I don't know if I can co-sign that. I think there are some episodes. I think they're like the Kenny Rogers Chicken episode, which is this is season 8 or season 9. Like, I really don't like it. I think it's a kind of a it's a body swap episode where they have Kramer acting like Jerry and Jerry acting like Kramer, and there's some good bits in it, but it's like it is, to me, it's the episode that is like, we're just doing what Seinfeld is supposed to do, because there's this line, there are just these lines in this episode where someone says, that's not good for blank, and then this other person says, that's not good for anybody, and they say that like 3 times, and it's like they're like a phrase, you know, like just trying to make a catchphrase happen from the show. So I do think, though, what the problem with him being gone and then coming back was he misunderstood the appeal of the show. And I think it's something that he gets right with Curb, is that I think he came back and he thought there had to be some atonement for these characters' social transgressions, their crimes, you know, for the time that
that was a mistake. Yeah.
And because he missed that everyone, so people get this, we had an episode about Succession. I didn't mention this recently, but Succession, it works. The appeal of it is more akin to the appeal of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia and Curb Your Enthusiasm and Seinfeld than it is to another dramatic series. And I say this because people often say about those comedic shows, it's like, well, you're not supposed to like the characters, which is why it's okay when they do like, racist or homophobic or whatever, like just like whatever terrible things, because you're not supposed to like them. And it's not that. It's you're not supposed to like how much you like them.
Right.
Because you pre-invest. They're bad. Like, they are bad. You know that. You're right to say you're not supposed to like them. But you're not supposed to like how much you like them because you're not supposed to like them. And because you have you've done that thing. You've given them something without you consciously knowing it. That gives them license to do terrible things. And then kind of for the purposes of your own ego, like you need to see them pay for it. So like you can kind of see why Larry got there, but like the issue is that like everyone forgave these characters for the terrible things that they had done.
Never been the bad boy.
You've been the bad employee, the bad son, the bad friend.
Yes.
The bad fiance, the bad dinner guest, the bad credit risk.
Okay, the point is made.
The bad date, the bad sport, the bad citizen. The bad tipper.
Maybe it's a lesson that Succession learns well, because Jesse Armstrong wrote Peep Show, a great show about horrible people.
Absolutely. I mean, like that is, I think that's completely correct. I mean, that's why that show, because it has this Peep Show core to it, and like, especially in the Greg and Tom relationship is very much like if Mark and Jeremy were both more ruthless, like just like a little bit. If both of them were just a little bit more ruthless, that would be their dynamic. But anyway, so that is like the core appeal of those kinds of, especially It's Always Sunny. Like, I just think like, because people were pointing this out, like Jennifer Aniston said something like Friends couldn't happen today because of like tastes and sensibilities have changed and whatever. And it's like the reason why you can't do Friends, or the reason why people have a problem with Friends and they don't have a problem with It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia and Curb is like, for one, those are not on network TV. But for two, the reason why they're not on network TV is like characters on network TV, except for Seinfeld, like really very few examples. Like, you are supposed to like the characters. Like you are like, you're supposed to like the characters on Friends, and you're supposed to be like, oh, they didn't mean it. Whereas like with Seinfeld, with those other comedies that I mentioned, it's like, no, they did mean it. And that, like they totally meant it. Like when George mistakes his boss for Sugar Ray Leonard, and he says to him, I suppose we all look alike to you, Costanza, because he's black, like that, like, and then George goes out of his way to prove he's not a racist by doing the most racist thing he can imagine, which is just bring a random black guy and pretend to have been friends with him forever because he has no black friends. Like
the exterminator.
The exterminator. That's why
it's the N-word class, right?
Exactly. That's what he's looking for. And it's like, you can't, like, you would never, of course, consciously condone that, but because you laugh at it, because it's funny, it's like, that's your giving license for it to happen. So like you end up implicated in that thing, and that's why it works, like on that level. And Friends doesn't have that because they want you to like those people,
because they don't have any black friends in it.
No, that's right. Which they were self-conscious to try to fix, and then when they realized it didn't like help them in the court of public opinion, they just like axed the Aisha Tyler character like completely, which is just absolutely awful.
So why do we have so many problems with the end? And why are we stuck in a mode of prolonging the end?
It's a great question, Michael. I think this is why, part of the reason why Freud writes psychoanalysis terminable and interminable, or analysis terminable and interminable, is that like, I think the problem with the end is that we are afraid of the middle. That's actually what like being in the middle, because like we have this probably the what would be the easiest thing to say, that there's an anxiety about the end because you don't know how or when it's going to come and what shape it's going to take. But I think if you go back to the original thing from Freud, from Studies on Hysteria, like that the end, the kind of cliffhanger there is a meaninglessness to it where it's because the axe falls that it has meaning at all. And I think that I think there is a general anxiety about that being enough. Like I love this line from Marge Simpson and possibly the best Simpsons episode. I believe it's called Rosebud. It's when Maggie has Mr. Burns' bear, Bobo.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the episode, Homer explains, he just says like, well, we didn't get any money, but Mr. Burns got what he wanted. Marge, I'm confused. Is this a good ending or a bad ending? And her response is, it's an ending. That's enough.
Right.
And I think that Marge Simpson conclusion is really, really hard to get to because of what I would say is like sort of a thing that is operative here is because of castration, because castration is hard. Like symbolic castration, really, really hard to accept. Like that's always the thing with, if we just look at the fictional example, like the banal examples, it's like what we were just talking about, like, oh, the Seinfeld episode, it could have been so much better. Battlestar Galactica could have been so much better. Like whatever show you want to say. And it's always like there was no other ending.
Right.
The ending that happened is the only ending there was ever going to be.
But it produces the fantasy of an alternative ending.
Yeah.
Yes, which is always more, it's always more satisfying because it's not actual. It's not real. It's like this is like potentially alienating example because it's sports, but it's sort of it's like this happens in any sport where draft picks are valuable in American sports. It's like the draft picks like, oh, you got 3 first-round picks. It's like, name the players. Why don't you name the players? Like go back, look at other drafts, look at the number, name the players. Would you have done that deal for those players? And most of the time, probably not. But when it could be anybody, it's super exciting. It's like, oh, that could be the player to be named later. This wonderful phrase from baseball. It's like it could be anyone, anyway, and it could be the most satisfying. Like that's the thing. We were denied the most satisfying thing because of this. And it's like, no, you weren't. It was never on offer. It was never going to be a thing. It happens a lot to like, I detest in some ways, I'm glad none of you really play video games because I detest the idea that I might have to identify as a gamer. I think this is like one of the worst like identity categories.
It's
like,
not a good one. Yeah.
It's not a good one because no one says they're a moviegoer or a TV watcher. I don't get this thing. Like there's nothing there is nothing in the media specificity that makes a gamer like a different like psychological prospect than any other kind of media. But like one thing I will say that is special to gamers is they cannot handle symbolic castration at all. Like if something was supposed to be good, the trailer made a game look really good and then it came out and was really bad. They cannot handle it. It's just,
I hear about it. Like it's like they'll make like news reports about gamers being disappointed about games.
It's crazy.
Funny.
It's crazy.
It was like the Zack Snyder cut of Justice, whatever.
Right.
It was supposed to be a good movie. It's like it was a really shitty movie. Then didn't he do it? And like it was.
He did it.
It was still bad. Yeah. Yeah.
It's fine. There's one interesting idea, but I think it's in the other film too, which is that they talk about they're talking about how to bring Superman back, and what they say is that like anyone can set a house on fire, but turning smoke into a house takes something. And I like that kind of reversal. Like that logic is really cool. Like so
yeah.
Like,
so that references what you're writing about in the essay in terms of smoke and the smoker, right? Like,
oh yeah, right.
The smoker becomes a smoker only once the smoke has been smoked.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's the kind of like, just to bring another thing into it, like a large language model, like a chat GPT would not understand the connection between smoke and smoker apart from the repetition that exists in language about those two things. Like it's not the kind of relationship that my limited understanding of computing, like notwithstanding, but like it's not the kind of relationship that you would build like a model of AI and understanding. Like it's a like that's a like smoke to smoker, this is like is a Lacan, example, is a different, it's a kind of alterity, like you, it's really like the smoke does where's the smoker produces the smoke, so there's this kind of like tautology. It's like the cigarette produces the smoke, like it's really interesting. It like a relationship to like what's happening in that kind of like in that position of signification, like, so that's yeah, so that you're right to bring that to the article from the Zack Snyder thing,
because where there's smoke there's fire would be like a kind of
that's a causal
fire
exactly,
precedes
it'd be a causal,
yeah, exactly.
And in a way, but maybe we can just
is not
touch
causal
on
like that.
the general. I think what you're referring to there is the role retroactivity plays in the serial, but maybe we could also like drop into the argument you're making in terms of like seriality, as well as being a kind of useful like model or tool for understanding media. Like, are you making a more kind of broader like ontological claim with the idea?
Yeah, I would say existential. I like the working title of the book is Seriality: the existential form of modern life. And I think that so one of the so I'll tell the story. During my dissertation defense, my my dissertation director, Naomi Mendel, put this question to me, which was that she said, the way that you talk about seriality, it's like so capacious that almost anything could be serial, and if everything is serial, then nothing is. And at the time I was like, yeah, that's a pretty good point. I think I gotta narrow that down. I gotta make, what, I should just do it about the media thing. And I'm like 5 years removed from that, and as I'm writing this book, my claim has gone in the opposite direction. It's everything is serial. And so what do we gain by thinking that way is what I'm trying to get at in the book. And I think it's very easy to, like, as we've been talking, it's really, really easy to talk about a television series. It's in the phrase to talk about television series as serial. It's very, very easy to, podcast what we're doing, to talk about the process of writing a book. Like I started with the process of writing a text as there being some sort of like internal seriality to it. It's very hard, or I would say not intuitive, to talk about, for a U.S. example, school shootings as serial. I mean, we all know it's a series, but no one does that. I don't see that word used that way, because you know what we do? We do serial killers, which is like it's like one person doing the same crime. That is a serial crime, but racist killing, that's not serial. Like, again, it is, but like in common parlance, it's not. And it's a lot harder to imagine these things as being serious. It's a lot like long time ago. Okay, so I was with some friends, and a friend of mine was complaining about, like, he was again in this relationship that was like I don't know, this like it was complicated. I don't want to give too many details, but because it won't help. But like, it was complicated in the same way that all this friend's previous relationships were complicated, and he was complaining about it. And my other friend said to him, like, "What are you talking about? Of course I don't like it. I'm complaining about it. It's terrible." Oh, anyway, and he goes to the bathroom, and then I said to my other friend, I was like, I don't think he was ready to hear that. And but that's like, but so like you wouldn't, so we would say things like serial monogamy, but like but why not this serial masochism of some kind of personality? We just tend not to think that way, but it doesn't make those things not a series. I find it very difficult to think of anything that is a true exception and one-off in a complete standalone nominalist sense. And I think that what I'm trying to do with the book is to say that like we have such a preference for thinking the exception. I think right now, like what's going on with the fires in Canada, and like we're gonna like this is gonna have, and like it's major U.S. news because of the way New York looked. Yeah. And then when it doesn't look that way, we'll remember this as an event, like capital E event, not in the Bajouian sense, but we'll remember it as an event, as an exception. But it's like, no. That's the rule. That's the series. That is like climate change is a series, and we need to think about it not in when it is like in our faces and we can't breathe. We need to think about it when it's not like chronic illness is serial illness. It's not just like I think there's a commonplace understanding about it where it's like you're in between flares, but it's an all the time thing. I have a difficult time finding doctors who take traumatic brain injury seriously as a serial condition, because it's even in the title, it's called injury. Like you should recover from it. Right. And
sorry, before I forget, Ryan, sorry to interrupt.
It's okay.
3 years ago, I was suffering from a constant headache, and I was one day listening to Why Theory, and you said that every day you have to stretch, but there's not as if there's one stretch you could do that would alleviate your need to stretch.
Yeah.
And like, it was amazing. Like that in that moment, it like unlocked like a completely different way of thinking about what I was going through. And probably like a month after that, it just kind of went away. So thank you for that.
Oh, wow. You're really welcome. Well, thank you. That's really, I'm going to cry about you saying
that's part of his doctorate, I reckon. Yeah.
It was quite a big moment for me, actually.
No, he called me up and he was like, you got to check out this podcast, Why Theory.
Was it because of that? Genuinely?
It was like right when I started listening to it. Yeah.
Phenomenal. Well, thank you for saying that. A lot of people have reached out to me about that, particularly on the chronic illness thing, because it's, well, I don't know. I guess it's not. It's one of those things. Like I lose my mind about this. Like students at Pomona who have disability accommodations because of a chronic illness have to every semester like recertify
prove themselves. Right.
Yeah, and it's like I my thing with the idea of like universality is the particular that changes all particulars. And this is just a real simple one. And I mean, like, you just think about this. If at a school or government or at a business, just anywhere, if we really, really committed to the idea that like when you have a chronic illness, it doesn't really get better. Like, and you don't have to continue to prove that you're still suffering. Like just that one little thing. Like the length that touches, like I'm not sure what like there so many things would change with that shift that like it doesn't get better, it gets more distant and subtle maybe sometimes, but like that doesn't mean it's not ever like completely in your face and overwhelming. And anyway, like all of these things, I think like we have this really great language. We have this really like accepted language of like the serial and like what does the cliffhanger do? Like the cliffhanger produces the kind of anxiety. Like, we have all this like really great language that's in media and it's in literature, and we do not use it to talk about everyday life. And I think like the only people who have understood how pervasive seriality have been people who've wanted to reject it, like Jean-Paul Sartre, which Todd and I talk about in the episodes we did on critique of dialectical reason.
Could you actually speak to because you mentioned Sartre in your essay in a very interesting way? Could you sorry, I wrote this question down, but I'm bottling it.
That's okay. That's okay.
You look beautiful though, Peter.
Ryan, how do Sartre's theories relate with this discussion of seriality?
Right. So he is the
You had to look that one up.
I can't remember that one.
I could not remember.
Michael, that's so funny.
Like this, right? Yeah.
What's the deal with Sartre and what you were writing, dude?
you're pulling like a comical glasses to put on to get like the fine print to make sure you get the words exactly right. So Sartre's place in this is Hitchcock has that like famous line about the picture being only good as its villain. I think a book is only as good as the position that you're against. And I think in some ways like Sartre is the villain of my book, but I think that's the wrong way to put it, because he's one of the only people that sees seriality in the way that I'm trying to explain it. It's just that what he does is he wants to reject it, and he sees it as this trap, this capitalist trap. So why does he see that? What are you talking about, Ryan? Maybe this is the first time you heard me say this to someone. So it's like this. He defines seriality as like a line of people waiting for a bus. This is his big, very famous example. And what he means by this is that like when you could adjust this to any public phenomenon, that when you get in a line to get on a bus, get on a train, when or whatever it is, wherever you are in public, you are grouped superficially, externally, by the imposition to do this kind of activity. And there is no potential for this activity to lead to anything meaningfully politically revelatory or emancipatory. And so some people read Sartre as like he lays out seriality, and it's like you have to enter the series and then you can move into what he calls this dynamic
infusion,
collective. Yes, exactly, the group infusion. But it's not like a progression like that. He thinks these are like absolute dualities, and the being in the series doesn't help you get to the group infusion. Like I think if you're really reading him on this point, like I a lot, again, like I said, like a lot of people have offered it as a progression. I just don't think it's there. They're completely separate things, because he wants to reject seriality at all costs. I mean, this is even stuff that it's in the notes in the critique of Dialectical Reason Volume 2, that like anything that is external is just the absolute anathema to what he thinks philosophically and existentially we should be arranging our lives around. So, but again, it's in this like it's in this rejection of this common formation of everyday life that I think he gets the existential point of it all. And what's interesting is in that book, the existential project kind of falls out, and he's more concerned with the Marxist points that he's trying to make. And I think that he rightly sees that like the series is the form of modern existence. And the issue is that like what he sees as alienating and isolating as the bulwark against producing a group infusion or a dynamic collective, I think that is the precondition for it. I think it's just a total flip. And this is why I write about the bottle episode in the way that I do, like in, the bottle episode of television. Like if you've ever seen all the characters in a show stuck in an elevator, that's a bottle episode. Bottle episodes constrain characters temporally and spatially, and like the thing that bottles them is not just the space or time, but it's some sort of intractable like personal conflict, like that gets elevated to the level of like existential torsion. And Community is really good at this. We've been talking about Seinfeld. The Chinese restaurant episode as that's a clear bottle episode. They're waiting in real time for a table at a Chinese restaurant, and they're very, very hungry, and they just like split apart, all of them as people. But a later season episode, the parking garage, I think is like a little bit, maybe is perhaps even better example, because all four characters are there. Season, yeah, they're looking for their car in the parking garage and they can't find it. And my claim is that to get out of the bottle, there needs to be this impossibility has to be produced. And what's really funny is like that doesn't exactly like they do find the car. They just find the car eventually. Mm-hmm. But fun fact with the episode is they were supposed to drive away at the end. And as you know from seeing the episode, they don't, because the car, like the prop car, was busted. Like the engine didn't work. And so they're just turning the key. Funny. You can kind of see it. They are cracking up in the car because and that's the ending of the show. Like it wasn't written. That's just what happened. And so like anyway, like go ahead.
Sorry, could you think of No Exit as somewhat of a bottle story from Sartre?
Yeah, it's interesting. I just think that he does, but I mean it's in the title, isn't it? Like I mean he doesn't like I think he's not predisposed to thinking like what like how Žižek does. Like we started this thing, this reversal. Like he really does take the things that limit one individually or put some sort of impediment to the enlargement of any kind of personal praxis. Like he really sees that as like that's a stopping point. That's like some kind of jailing of the self. Like, and he really, like, you know, we talked about on the podcast on my theory about like his thing on records, like going to buy like the top 20 records is like you have a record collection of no one. You just have a popular record collection. Like that's it. That is representative of no one, because he's really opposed. He's really opposed to the public and the popular in a way. And he thinks that like the closer you get to that, the farther you get away from yourself. And there are things in that like I think can make sense on first glance, but like there's just a libertarian bent to that I don't jive with. Like he in some ways, this maybe goes too far to say this, but like I do think that, especially when he's writing Critique of Dialectical Reason, I think he finds the public kind of detestable. And like there's something about when he's talking about the bus, the line of people waiting for the bus, like he's in a building, he's doing writing, and he's like literally above them, looking down, like condescendingly looking down his nose at these plebs going about their day. Like,
can I say two things about that?
Yeah.
The first one is a personal experience. Last year I was working in a cafe, and I would have to go to work at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And one morning I'm sitting on the subway platform in New York, and I'm looking at all these people around me on the subway platform, and I think to myself, look at these poor bastards going to work at 6 a.m.
That's
I would
good.
hate that.
Yeah.
And I did hate it. The second is that your description, I haven't read that part of Critique of Dialectical Reason, but your description of it, the people waiting for the bus stop, reminds me of Marx's comment in Brumiere about the sack of potatoes.
Okay.
French peasantry is kind of atomized and self-interested and do not form a revolutionary subject because they're maybe in a kind of series of potatoes. They don't form a kind of unified political whole like the proletariat does.
Yeah, I think that. So I just like I kind of can't go there because it's like it imagines that. I don't think class structure means we have a different psychic structure. Like I cannot go there. It's there. I cannot go for any kind of. I'm not saying that you're saying this, or even that Marx or Sartre are saying this exactly, but like a kind of like a class determinism, like once an unaware, unwashed,
the unwashed potato,
unwashed potato, always an unwashed potato. I think that it's I would call it like symptomatic of that they're like it's fine. I've often say this. It's fine that there's not a dynamic or dialectical psyche in Marx, because like he's writing before Freud, so it's just like, you know, and there's no like you can't. It's funny. I remember being in a class in grad school. This wasn't a Todd class. This was at URI, where somebody said, "What did people think of the unconscious before Freud?" And because this particular student wanted to not deal with Freud on the unconscious,
right.
and the professor, she just said like there wasn't one, like it just it like it didn't exist. It didn't exist as an idea. Like you can't go. There's not a thing. It's just like there are like examples like in the in the Bible, like Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat, like there like where there's like dreams but like where they're prophecies, but that's not the unconscious, like it's not even close. So for I think that the problem that Sartre has, and I would say that I think that like maybe the problem with Marx has in that example is that like I like you can't, it's hard for me to deny someone on the basis of anything that they have a less rich or complicated psychic structure than I do. And I think that there is the potential, like if you're really committed to dialectics, you have to accept the idea that even the least likely person who could potentially be a left liberatory radical has at least the potential to be like, and you have to accept that. And Sartre doesn't, and which is like, I mean, that's how he writes his book. Like, that's fine. But I think it's a clear deficit. And I think the reason why structurally it's a deficit is because he sees this caging, this like superficial caging of people as absolute and not as the precondition for an emancipatory recognition. Like I think like what are we doing right now? We're on Zoom right now in 4 different squares. I've said this in different places. You cannot convince me that we're not in the same place right now. Like, I know we're in 4 different time zones, but like we're having this conversation. We're thinking through these things. You cannot convince me we're not in the same place. And I just think like why are we in the same place right now? It's not because, oh, the Zoom lets us get together. No, Zoom graphically dramatizes our exact separation. I see 4 squares at the top. I see 1 square in the middle. We are separated graphically right in front of me. There's no illusion. It's not a VR, AR experiment that tricks my brain physiologically to think we're in the same place. We are literally split, but it is through this split that we are together. And I know that probably sounds like a Honda commercial, but like the thing is that sometimes those things have to be like, those ideas like have to be won and taken, and I think like fought for a little bit. And so that's why that's why I think seriality is this like this wide, like capacious thing, just as Sartre does. But I think it's like I think that like it is it's the engine of group and self-discovery. I would put it that way.
This gap between people is not alienating. It's generative of something, right? Gap between
and gap within. You have to think both of those things.
Sure.
That like it's the gap between is evident, and that's what Sartre sees. But the gap within is not something he sees, because that's this like this psychical move that he rejects in Being in Nothingness. Like he rejects psychoanalysis and completely for like some reasons that are actually like quite psychoanalytic, but it's like it's that's whatever. But he disavows, and I think this is sort of my novel introduction is to focus on the gap within, the gap between and the gap within. And I think it's like that's why I think there's this homology between gapped serial material and our psyches, because it overlaps with the gapped way that we go through our mental lives, and like and you live with characters and you live with shows far longer than you ever see them. Yeah. Like we probably talked about Seinfeld longer than any Seinfeld episode.
Yeah. But I was just gonna that makes sense to me in terms of like philosophically or psychoanalytically why you disagree with Sartre. Another point you bring up in the essay is in terms of what he says about seriality and ideology, like ideology or seriality being like a mode in which ideology is communicated. And I think Žižek might in some ways agree with that. I can see that it might be a useful way of thinking about ideology. Certainly you can see how like films like the Marvel universe, for instance, is a perfect way of like communicating like military propaganda, for instance.
Sure. Sure. But what I would say on this is that I don't know when, but it will happen that someone will be able to make a film that skewers the military but got total military endorsement. As people may not know, when any US film has the US military in it, the Pentagon gives that material for free, as long as they get, sort of like script approval a little bit. It is like the Hays Code, the production code, and like there is a way to get the military endorsement and to make a film that is anti-military. Just no one has done it.
What about
the second part?
What about I can't remember the name right now. The Starship Troopers.
Oh yeah. Well, that's a great. I think that's a great example. I don't. So that's a pre 9/11 film, as far as I remember.
Yeah,
so
years before,
So I don't know if the program from the Pentagon was the way that it is now. Then it would be my
that is
only
one of
thing.
the most effective like anti-military movies I think out there, and it's so over the top.
I agree. I agree with you. And I mean, there's even like in even bad movies, like you just want to think about like the 9/11 turn in American films. Like I think it's in 98 or 99 as the Matthew Broderick Godzilla movie. The U.S. military is portrayed exclusively as a bumbling group of fuckwits, and the people who save, you'll never see this again. You know who saves America is the French Foreign Legion. You will never ever see that again. It will never happen again. Yes. So your question about like seriality.
The second half of that question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So like, I think I see what you're saying in the critique of Sartre there. I also can see how like maybe you can think of seriality in that way. I'm just wondering, like, in your kind of account, how can you differentiate between like seriality that's kind of generative that accounts for the gap, and also a kind of seriality that truly is just like either bad art or a product of ideology.
Yeah, so I do write about this. In my book, it's not in the article. I think it's where are you in the series? And I would say if you in the series look good, probably there is a perpetuating of ideology, which I define. So I'll just put it this way. For me, ideology is that which sustains status quo. Mm-hmm. And the best way to think about that, I mean, especially with the psychoanalytic leaning, is how unconsciously you're sustaining that. So that's a very, very important dimension to ideology. It's in its unconscious dimension, in the way that you act in support of that which consciously you are against or disagree with. So that's what I would say. I think an acceptance of castration, like the thing we were talking about at the end, like I think is really, really crucial. Like it's really, it's just, I think this is especially important in any kind of anti-racist project, especially if you're coming to it from the position of a white person. Like the thing that you're doing, is the thing that you're doing to help, some kind of anti-racist project. Like, does it make you look good? If it makes you look good, you're probably not looking hard enough at how you're implicated in a series that you, again, consciously don't want to be a part of. So that's what I would say. I think that like a radical acceptance of castration and like your position and maybe the things that you do that are like, and this is why it has to be social and dynamic, because like I don't think you can or one can just think of all the ways that they unconsciously support the series, again, the wider existential series that I'm talking about, I don't think that you can on your own come up with the ways that you contribute to that. I do think that there needs to be this dynamic with other people, with the public, and it doesn't mean that other people are always right, because again, like in someone potentially calling you out, maybe they're sustaining their own series where they always look good. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's just like there is just like there's nothing. I say this sometimes to my to my students on the first day of class that I don't imagine the classroom as a space of like me versus you or you versus me. I think it's both of us versus the syllabus. So the syllabus is this like look, I constructed this. This is like I made this before I met any of you, and there are things about it that won't work. And so we're in this negotiation to figure out what's going to be the best way to do this class. And I think that like too often we get into the accusations of cartoon villainy, and that like in this like, and I think imbibe the logic of some kind of non-contradiction, some sort of some purity of political position that is that is not tenable and not actionable, and it is because it's not tenable and not actionable that it is like the perfect ending of a TV series, that it it acquires this laudable and laudatory status. But you have to accept that the cut at the core of your being, and that like you're just like, it doesn't matter, it really doesn't matter how I don't know, at no point how effective you may be at anything. Like, I mean, there is fault, there is flaw, there is lack, there is gap, and it's not, the point isn't to erase those things or to be what's the best version of yourself, but it's to go back to the beginning, to see the best version of yourself is the worst version of yourself, and that I think is, if you can do that, that is a minimal way toward accepting your castration, and then to move that undertaking psychically to your position socially, okay, and how you are implicated in discourses and systems that you did not construct but you enter into, and what is it in those systems that you are upholding and and supporting. And I think that like I don't imagine that as a project of like constantly feeling like guilty. I think it's like quite the opposite. Like I just think that like you like to be aware of one's contradiction and the impossibility of one's non-contradiction, both personally and socially, I tend to think of as like a real emancipatory thing. And I think it's the only, I think it's like this primary initial gesture that one has to take before a meaningful collective can emerge, which is again why I'm opposed to Sartre, because he wants to avoid contradiction in like he sees the seriality as all contradiction, and the group infusion is no contradiction. He does acknowledge the potential for a group infusion to fall back into seriality, but that's about as complicated as that gets for him. And I think this
is pretty interesting, right, Ryan? Like the political valence of seriality. So we were wondering, like, the seriality of capitalism as a form, like the series of crisis, the to be continued of market crashes or global warming, the seriality of leadership itself in election cycles.
Yeah.
So is capitalism, do you see capitalism as inherently serial?
I think I have to. I mean, like, if I'm being consistent with my principles, like, I mean, the point is, I think too often what happens is that someone would acknowledge that and say, like, well, seriality is on the side of capital, therefore it can't be on the side of emancipation. And I again, like, if you think dialectically, like, that just is a nonsense. It's like what is it, Francois Truffaut? We were just talking about this earlier. Like, there's no such thing as an anti-war film. right? I think that's his line. And it's just like, so Truffaut found the only non-dialectical thing to ever exist. I just like, I have a hard time with accepting that as the premise. Like, I get what he's saying, that like there's a glorifying of war, and usually what happens is like films are anti-war but pro-soldier, and isn't that in the end, pro-war? But I just like I just reject the premise out of hand. So
yeah,
I think that yes, I mean, a lot of people have said this, like capital operates in this serial way. What I will say is different about the way capital operates and it evinces its seriality is I do not think it wants you to pay attention to the gap at all. I think what capital wants to do, I mean, this is what ideology wants to do, or what it does is it smooths over the gaps in the fissures in the social, in any system. And so I think that, like, yes, on the one hand, we are all given this like immense serial cultural production, but and we can note evidently the gap between these things, but capital does not want us to think about the gap within them. It does not, like how it works. I mean, this is the Marxist film, the basic like gesture of Marxist film theory is that like you would say that film does nothing so well as hide the fact and act of its own production, which is the same as what capitalism does. That's the motor of capitalism. You are not supposed to see how the sausage is made. Like, that's just like, that is not a part of it. So to me, that is the gap. Like, if we want to concretize it, that's a gap within something. And like, capital is premised and purposed with, we do not see that. You don't see the gap within. Like, it's like these are non-lacking products insofar as only insofar as like they may not completely satisfy you, so you can get the next one, but there's nothing to be concerned with here. Like, you don't scrutinize this like at all. And it's that thing where, like, again, some people accuse this as like a depth model, and it's like the gap is on the surface of these products, and the whole way that capitalist ideology works is so we don't see that. So what you see is like a whole product, WHOLE, and you don't see that it's a whole product, HOLE. That's the whole point. So that would be,
that's like the gap produced by montage in film, right?
So the gap, yeah. So that, well, I mean, Eisenstein imagines montage. So this is a really important distinction that is kind of blurred in contemporary usage of. I hate in English montage becomes editing, because it loses what Eisenstein is talking about, is that montage, like, again, editing, like cut should be dialectical, and that like you have a dialectical smashing of one to another. It shouldn't be like in this conversation, Michael, when you ask me a question, I see you on the screen, and then when Peter does, he's on the screen. It shouldn't just be like shot, reverse shot to establish where people are. That's like, there's nothing dialectical happening between these shots. So yeah, in that sense, I would say it is in that movement of almost, it's in that movement away from Eisenstein. And so like we have the dialectical and the revolutionary potential in montage, and then what we have is the staid place setting perfunctory aspect of editing, a shot, reverse shot, and those kinds of things. I think that's what I would say.
Was it the TV and film one?
Yeah.
Excuse me, Mr. Ryan.
That's a doctor if you're going to be weak like that.
Sorry, there you go. All right, very casual now.
Okay.
So how does seriality differ in TV from film? So you said something along the lines of film is the medium of desire and television is the medium of drive.
Yeah, I think I did say that, didn't I?
Have you changed your mind?
No, I haven't. I'm just remembering because that was some time ago. So it's interesting.
It's a much earlier essay. Yes,
it was a much earlier essay. It was in the book. I like that book a lot. Edited collection, cinematic cuts, essays on film endings. I think that I suppose what I would say is that because I had gotten into this thing when I was first started to write about seriality. I had been convinced that the way to write about it would be to differentiate different kinds of serial. Like a film series is a different kind. It has a different relationship to its own seriality than a television series does, and so that would explain the difference why film is on the side of desire and why TV is on the side of drive. And the more that I wrote and thought about it, I don't think I like that distinction in that way. I haven't written that for that reason, but it is like this is a thing people like to do. Like Umberto Eco it's a really great essay, and he it's called, I think, Innovation and Repetition, and it's about seriality, popular seriality, and and he just names these different kinds of repetition, and there's a lot of there's really interesting work, and there's a guy, his name is Shane Denson. He teaches at Stanford, and he has I believe he's the person I read talking about this, about a serial figure like Batman is has a a background regardless of where Batman appears. Batman's a serial figure, and there's a whole history, a whole narrative seriality prior to him that is in kind of cultural memory before you ever see him. Yeah. I would say perhaps the best example of the serial figure is probably Barbie. I mean, Barbie there's going to be this new Barbie film coming out next month, I guess, or later. I can't remember. It's the same day that Oppenheimer comes out, the Nolan film,
and Mission Impossible
3. Yeah.
No freaking way.
8.
Yeah. So Tom is buying up all of the non-IMAX cinemas and calling them personally to make sure that his film gets screened.
How could you say no to him?
Oh my God.
This is a pro Tom Cruise.
We love Tom Cruise here.
Oh my God. I love this mission. I love the Mission Impossible film. I'm with you. I think
they're the best action movies going right now. The Mission Impossible movies.
They're really good. They're unfortunately better than almost any Bond movie.
Oh, at this point, definitely. Miles better.
Yeah, I love. There's other things. So Bond's another good example of serial figure. Anyway, okay, I want to get back to the question. So there's a lot of so my sometimes I learned this about myself recently. A lot of times people ask me a question, I don't answer the question directly. Instead, what I do is I explain why I think the way that I do. And that's how I'm answering choosing to answer this question, because I think if I answered it directly, it wouldn't mean anything. So it is a popular move to try to break certain kinds of seriality down and to explain it, but in sort of a component part kind of way. And my whole thing in I'm trying to live up to the capaciousness of my own claims. So I'm trying to find a way how does it articulate differently with one medium than it does another? Okay. And in a way that doesn't say they're different kinds of seriality. That I think is the important thing. So what I would say, just to actually get back to the question about film, I think that there is a difference in how, and this is collapsing, but there's a difference in how we watch film. And even if you watch it by yourself on a computer or on your phone, the film, I would even say the films that are made for Netflix, they're not made with the assumption that that's how they're going to be watched. There is this idea that they're going to be watched in coded silence in a darkened theater, and I think that means something. And so what that means, I mean, this is kind of the magic of the theater, if you like, and this is why Todd specifically talks about film as this medium of desire, is that you, through the film image, will find yourself endorsing. I mean, we're just talking about Cruise, characters or things people do that, again, in your conscious life, you wouldn't. And there's maybe not a better example of the end of Silence of the Lambs, when Hannibal Lecter tells Clarice Starling that he's going to have an old friend for dinner tonight, and he walks off, and I don't care who you are, you're oh, he's going to eat that guy. That guy's a piece of shit. He deserves it. And it's are you fucking kidding me? He deserves to be eaten? him because he was a misogynist.
Yeah,
like
just a
repeatedly.
jerk.
It's just a jerk, and like,
Yeah.
like he deserves something to happen to him. I don't know that he deserves to get eaten. Like what a claim to endorse, like immediately, upon seeing this, this just dialectical positioning of images and dialogue, right? And that's why what's so great about the end of that film is that, like, what Jonathan Demme has us do is, like, he has us sit with how we're on board with what Lecter's about to do, like, and you just watch him walk away, and so you're sat with that. And I wouldn't say that television can't do that, but it doesn't, because the next installment, and I think we were sort of talking about this a little bit earlier, the next installment comes like pretty quickly after, and so I think where you get things with TV that you don't with film, and this would be on like the drive aspect, is it happens in reverse rather than in Silence of the Lambs, where you're like, you see your desire laid bare because you're about to endorse Lecter going to eat this guy who's a piece of shit. On TV, it's like when we get something like that, people are like, well, I wanted that thing, but not like that. And so to me, the great example is in Game of Thrones in the final season, which ends not terrible, not super well, but it does have this, I think, a great moment where, when Khaleesi finally makes the turn to become like the Mad Queen and a villain, all people could write about. Oh yeah, sorry. All people could write about afterwards is like, that happened too fast. That wasn't into, like, it was, and and it was fast, but it's sort of like what people are saying is, I wanted to inoculate my rooting for her up to the point that she became villainous. And so, like, that I think that is the drive. It's like, no, that's what you wanted. You wanted that. You wanted the strong female character thing everyone always talked about with that show. You wanted to be just as ruthless as a man. It's like, there it is. But you didn't want it like that. You wanted it like some other way. So
how is this complicated with the twist ending? So you made a distinction between twist endings and limited open endings?
So I would say this, that I don't know if I've shifted on this, but I have written about twist endings in the book, and what I write about is in terms of quilting point, and we could get into this, but I don't necessarily want to introduce like another term. What I think is really interesting about twist endings that I wish I had thought about at the time, but I didn't, is that, like, we always say that, we just as you said, twist endings, they're almost never the actual end of the film. It's really, really hard to think of a twist that ends
punctuated on the absolute end. Yeah.
Absolute end. There's always like Sixth Sense is a great example, where it's the, like, what's the great line from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia is, he was watching Sixth Sense and didn't realize that the entire time the old guy was Bruce Willis. Like, that was how he interpreted the twist of the film. But it's the Bruce Willis character realizes obviously that he's a ghost and he needs to move on. But that's not the end of the film. What the end of the film is I guess departs the material realm, the film stock changes into white, and then it transitions kind of through a dissolve, but a little bit quicker, more like a regular cut, more like a cross cut, into the wedding video between him and his wife in the movie, and it's like not clear, like, who's watching that? Is his wife because his wife was watching the movie, but we're just watching the video, like we're in the screen, and it's like, is she watching that? Is that his last memory? Is that this extra diegetic thing? Either way, that's what literally ends the film. And I don't think that's really in the cultural memory of it. It's the same thing with Usual Suspects, is we have that that look on Agent Kujan's face when he realizes that he just let Kaiser Soze go and he drops the coffee cup. Everyone thinks about that. That's not how the film ends. The film ends, he runs out into the street and he's just like bereft, and then the movie's over. And
so what about Inception then?
So Inception would be the thing that it is well, this is kind of my point, is that the twist endings, it's to think about it as the twist, as the important part, is the kind of like, it's like this fulfillment, like this fullness of meaning, when really like what's happening is there's a castration involved that is forgotten largely culturally, like that, like we, Agent Kujan's face, like that's not like, I wouldn't, when he drops a coffee cup, that's not castration, that's he's actually solved it. It's his face in the street, and we don't think about it that way. And it's like, again, we don't end on the cut of Malcolm, I forget his last name, Malcolm Crowe, I think that's his name, the Bruce Willis character in The Sixth Sense. We don't end like that. We end this thing this later. So I think that there is a castration that is often covered up, like, because I do still endorse this. What the twist ending does is it doubles the narrative. You get to enjoy the film twice. You enjoyed it the way that the naive way, and then you have this position of knowledge.
But it changes
retroactively changes the meaning
right.
of the,
And what are we denied in Inception is that retroactive recognition. Like we don't have it. Like, so like it's like although except for the fact that like Michael Caine is never in the dream world, and he is so I kind of think that's like a pretty,
don't be that guy.
Sorry. But like
I actually don't get what you mean there. Is he having a dream, Michael Caine?
No.
Michael Caine,
It's just
Leonardo DiCaprio.
Michael Caine. Apparently, Michael Caine asked Christopher Nolan, like, is what he's doing, because just so he could know as a character. And Nolan told him, anytime you're in it, it's real. Anytime you're not in it, they're in a dream. And so that's
okay.
Because in the end, when what's DiCaprio's character's name? Is it Cole? Is that his name?
I haven't seen it in ages.
But when he spins the totem to see if it's real or not, Michael Caine is there. But that doesn't matter, because as we learned in the film, this is Todd's point, it's not even his totem, it's his wife's. Right. So why should it work for him in the same way? So even though Caine is there, why should it work for him the way that it worked for his wife? Why should it signify it the same way? I think that this denial of the twist, and this imposition of the cut, I think is why the end of that film, this is why we're still talking about it, like if it fell, we're not talking about it. If it was clear, if there was if we zoomed out, right, or we had a dolly, like a tracking shot back, and it's just spinning, just endlessly spinning, then we have like our answer one way or another. And it's a much less, I think, interesting film. Although I do think that Nolan may have regretted the blowing that choice for the ending, because I think in Dark Knight Rises he wanted to, like, I think he wanted to have it end with Michael Caine smiling in France or whatever, but then we get the reverse shot of Christian Bale is there and alive, but so which is just like, I don't know.
Yeah, it spoils it.
Yeah, it doesn't.
You're right. Yeah, you're right.
All that much sense. But yeah, so I think, I don't know, Michael. I don't know if that totally answers your question, but I think that, like, because of the way that because a film is a short story, even when it's in a series, and like I like to go back to Poe on this, that like his whole thing is that like a story, like successful or effective fiction, is that which is can be consumed in one sitting. Mm-hmm. And what he explains is there is a unity of effect that gets broken when you write a story the way that Charles Dickens does. I mean, Dickens is literally name checked in the first line of Philosophy of Composition, this thing that Poe writes. Now, I think what we do is we bring our like our psyche structure for each show like when we watch it, and and Poe doesn't have that consideration. Like he thinks once it's over, and like you lose something that you can't ever get back when you keep going back to the same fictive world. I don't necessarily agree with that, but what I do think is that it is easier because of the setup of film, because of the short storyness, because of the encasement that we are in when we watch a film. It is more on the side of showing our desire back to us in a way that we are, like, go along with. And it's only upon reflection that you can be like, oh, that was kind of fucked up. That thing that I thought was like all right. And whereas I think because of the interstitial nature of television, and because the gaps are so much closer or than they would be in film, I think that it is more likely to produce what happened with Game of Thrones, where it's like, I was expecting this, but not like that. And I think that like it's really easy to do the arm's length thing. I do think this was something that Poe is right about, but it for maybe a different reason. I just think it's really easy to get cynical about a show, because there's so much of it, I guess, and you you adopt this stance of like, well, it needs to impress me, which I think is the worst viewing position maybe you could adopt for anything. It's really not fair to something like I'll give into this if it impresses me first. It's like no one's that important.
No,
that's like, come on.
Well, that's the thing. Like, do we end the episode on like The Sopranos Black, like the void, or do we
don't ruin the end of
tie it all up
I haven't
like
seen
Seinfeld? Or
well, so I won't ruin the end of Sopranos for you, but I will say that like I do think that again
the audience gets whacked.
I mean, like we come back to castration, I think, with that ending maybe more than any other. And it's like I do think that in TV it's a little more stark like than it is in film. Like I think in like film what's so radical about film, as I keep saying, is that like it can bring you along in a political, existential, aesthetic position that you have no prior familiarity with, that you don't necessarily share, you don't have that experience, and it can bring you along in it, and you're along for the ride. And it's in the along for the rideness that you do have to give up of yourself. And I think that like TV always has to fight that battle, where it has to continue to make viewers give that initial push to it. And that's what I think would be the psychical difference. Is that like it's and it's for like dead stupid reasons. Like it's easy to forget you're in a theater when you're watching a movie, or it's easy to forget you're watching a movie when you're watching a movie. I just think it's like a little bit harder with a television series, and that initial thing, like you have to put yourself in that position again and again and again. And I think like there's when people are disappointed in a movie, they're disappointed maybe with the way that it ended, but there's not, just because the way that we watch movies is continuous. And I know that sometimes I take a break, or if I'm watching on my laptop or whatever, but like I don't stop to think in the middle of a movie like, ooh, this might disappoint me later. Like that's just too like, I'm sure maybe some people do, but I just think that's too protective. It's too cynical. It's too like not non-invested to like what it's going to do. But I think like TV like lends itself to that kind of conversation, and I think that's why it is a better avatar of the drive. I think that like the form of it undermines itself. I mean, that's what I associate the most with the drive, is this capacity, this unerring capacity to undermine yourself. And I think that like the form of TV gives immense opportunity for shows to like undermine themselves and fall over themselves, whereas the form of film doesn't. You know, a film series, sure, played out over a long time, but I mean, like the conversation we're having is about like the form of a film and the form of you know, of TV. And I think, like, again, like an individual episode, you know, it operates according to the same rules as a film does. But like the thing about a film, the thing about seriality is that it is always the next term has absolute authority to rewrite what came before, and that
like
can be
a prequel,
even a prequel. Like, I mean, that's why like the best what are the best prequels? Like Better Call Saul, you know, and there's a, you know,
what about the
I mean,
what's the Sopranos one?
The Many Saints of Newark.
Yeah, no good.
Well, it's a prequel film, you know. I don't,
because they couldn't continue the series, or they could go through the middle.
Right.
But they went for
you have to. They went for prequel. It's interesting. Like the prequels are great when they make you rethink what happened in the other text.
But it's a way of prolonging the end still.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, like, I think like some of the best, like maybe the best prequel is a video game, is a Red Dead Redemption 2. I mean, like, it's just like absolutely.
People love that one, I hear.
Yeah, I've heard
yeah. It's beloved for a lot of reasons, narratively especially. But it's like I think in some ways Lynch a little bit invents the prequel with the with Fire Walk with Me. I mean, like, it's kind of funny. Like, we've lived with the word prequel we think it's been around forever. It has its the most usage of that phrase. It occurs with the prequel Star Wars films. It was a phrase that
did not know
the Phantom Menace and Lucas like mobilized to like to explain those movies and what they were. It didn't. Like, that's not the first use of that, and you can go back and you can say things like, "Oh, the Iliad is the prequel to the Odyssey,
Book of Daniel."
Yeah, right. But it's like that. That's what I mean. So like that matters. Like people didn't talk about it in that way until much more recently. But that's the kind of the cool thing about the prequel is that like the thing that came before can also have this retroactive meaning on the thing that comes later, and that's when they work really, really well. And so yeah, I'll
at the risk of prolonging the ending, maybe fellas, we should end it soon, now ish.
Marge, I'm confused. Is this a happy ending or a sad ending?
It's an ending. That's enough.
Well, thanks for taking the time to speak with us today, Ryan.
Yeah, that goes both ways. Thanks for taking your time to talk to me. I really appreciate it. A really great conversation. Thumbs up, you guys. Yeah, no, this was super fun.
And so on. And so on. And so on. And so on. And so on.